Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday to you. Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with technology, change, innovation. This week, I'm going to have a quick look at talent, Ben. Claude Mythos, perhaps something about a probe, and that is not a Ford car from the 90s. Let's move on. What do you want to do first? I like this about market behaviors. Rational market. How about dumb and bizarre?
I like it. I love the headline. Brilliant. Yeah. Well done, carrier management. Yeah, look, I don't think this article says a lot, but I tell you what, in specific terms about the market or whatever, but it tells you a lot about how the cycle works and, maybe what we need to think about in the future. It heavily features Barclay Jr. of W.R. Barclay fame and Greenberg Jr. of Chubb fame, talking about the markets. And obviously we're in a softening part of the cycle, and there is a lot of kind of talk about what's going on and rates shifting down 9% according to Marsh in property globally, various players pulling back a bit, which we'll come on to. But these senior execs, Barclay, now this could be a bit self-serving, let's say this, but they are both, quite decent sized businesses, and they're saying there's kind of really rather strange, bizarre behavior happening around markets. Now, the first one that they talk about here really is that businesses in the US, mainstream insurance, state insurers basically, are kind of trying to win certain types of business back in the market against, say, the E&S, the excess and surplus line specialty business that often goes out to places like Lloyd's. And they're saying that's a little bit weird because the rates are going down and they're going for stuff that's not that great, and, getting excited about various things that in the retail end of things. But fundamentally, I think they're saying that these businesses are just trying to create growth at all costs or retain business at all costs. And therefore, this is causing some of the bigger players to sort of take note and make comments like they are making about, this is slightly dumb. Why are you doing this? It's creating irrationality. The Greenberg says the property and financial lines are softening at a pace that is quite frankly dumb. And that's because this is people writing and dropping their prices and taking the business for that. So, he says Greenberg says it's pretty classic. This happens all the time in the market. And he's featuring, interesting, talking about MGAs. And he's been talking a lot about MGAs' intent on growing volume. And he sees them as part of the problem because they're trying to grow. He names, funny enough, he names everybody at fault other than the insurers. But anyway, so the MGAs, the brokers, alternative capital. Yeah, you and me probably in there somewhere. Alternative capital, almost everything other than the traditional insurer that he, funnily enough, runs. But putting that to one side, he says that it's really about supply and demand. It's the amount of supply capital chasing finite amount of business. So while this is a reasonably long article, fundamentally that's the one line that explains everything, is that there's too much capital chasing too little business in the market, and it's creating irrational behaviors. And the bigger, if you like, players with deeper pockets who can wait a bit longer are sort of saying, you're a bunch of idiots, you're pushing the prices down, but what we'll wait for is a rebound when it all goes back up, and then we'll make money. So there's a bit of a bit of a game going on in the language that's used. But I think my takeaway is that, so Greenberg says it's the reinsurance market, the alternative capital, and the number of bites of Apple in the supply chain taken by the brokers and the MGAs as well for writing stuff. He said, and he fundamentally says that everybody other than us takes a commission. And what that does in these markets is it drives a certain type of behavior, which is volume rather than profit, because they want commission now. And if they're not getting commission, they'll get it any way they can. I guess that's probably going to be somewhat true. I think my takeaway, though, as I said, is what do we do about this? Because it's not very good for clients, and it results in, you just have to go onto your own personal insurance. I just redid my home insurance this week, and it was, I was quoted by my last year's carrier at £1,600, which was twice what I was charged last year. I went back on the aggregator and got it for £650. So, a third of the price being quoted. Sorry, £1,800 I was quoted. So that just seems ridiculous and illogical. There's no sense to it at all. A rather bizarre thing that I went through to one of the big providers, which I was going to go with, and then it said, the assumption is you're not within 200 meters of water, i.e. a river or a brook. Well, I am about 100 meters, but I checked it up on the flood system in about 10 seconds on the government website, which said I had the lowest level of likelihood of flooding, 0.001%, and there hadn't been a flood. So why does the insurer not have that data? Because we're going to come on to data, later, and how bad it is. And why does the insurer not just take my postcode and say, well, why don't all insurers not take it? Because clearly the next insurer I went to had taken that and accepted at the same price. So always round, it looks like the data's bad, the response then is bad. So it's the blind leading the blind. And I think that Barclay and Greenberg are saying, you're all kind of sheep going down the wrong route. Ultimately, we should win because we're the insurers, which is fair enough. They're ploughing their own furrow. But it ends up not being very good for customers, I think.
So what's interesting about the supply and demand thing is that you would see, so there's there's too much capital chasing too few risks. So the price is dropping. But then you think then the people with the capital would go, oh, I'm not getting the return that I thought I would. And so then it starts to come out. But I saw an article, I think it was on the Slipcase, which was saying that Hiscox had increased it. I think it was its reinsurance alternative capital from, I don't know, 1.2 to something like 2.4 billion or something.
Yeah.
So the money is still coming in. So that's kind of, your supply side.
I know, but the thing is, it's complex. It's probably more complex than they're really saying. And I think Greenberg does more of this in his letter, which we won't get into now. But I also think it's the number of players that there are in the market. When Greenberg moans about brokers, there's a lot of brokers, right? There's a lot of retail brokers. There's consolidation in that market, but there's a lot of brokers. There's lots of links in the chain that even brokers would say shouldn't be there. There's all these small retailers. They're all vying as individuals almost, bunches of small teams going, well, we've got to get some commission. Otherwise we don't get a bonus. We don't get it. So there's a huge kind of infrastructure of inefficiency in all of this, I think, which is there as well, so it's not this kind of, so that's why I love this title, as it's dumb and bizarre. The bizarre comes from the fact that so many people are all trying to get a bite of the cherry. And Greenberg's got a point, absolutely. I do think that brokers add a lot of value. I've done a lot of research on that and looked at it, but not everywhere, right? And I think there has to be a limit when the market is, constrained, if you like, because of the amount of business. That's perhaps, you could look at innovation there, and too much capital, its worst side comes out, and it will lose, lots of people will lose money, and that's supposed to thin out the market, but it destroys capital, really. It destroys value in the market. So it's very, I think it's something that we need to think about, is how do you smooth off this cycle, really?
Yeah.
And it's no good going, oh, you've got to be disciplined, because it's no good telling people to do that when they're not earning any money. I mean, if they're struggling, to make their bonuses, make their financials, pay the mortgage in these businesses, they'll lower the price if they can. And there isn't enough control in the system to stop that happening.
Yeah. Interesting. We'll obviously keep an eye on that. It is that kind of, you're right in that it's the smoothing rather than the cycle itself. It's like, how do we kind of round the edges rather than...
I think if there's rational reasons for, irrationalities in this as well, if there are rational reasons for prices going down, that increasing catastrophes, evolving risks, all those things make a lot of sense and you can deal with via innovation. But this kind of panic that sets in that creates writing for the top line, not the bottom line. And your point is right, but capital doesn't know that until the claims come in.
Yeah.
So you take your commission today, right? And the price of the price of that policy is really written if a claim comes in or when a claim comes in, or if it doesn't. So you can get away with it basically by taking the money, taking the profit now.
Good. Right, let's move on then, Ben. So I saw this. Well, actually, Max forwarded me a LinkedIn clip that seemed to be getting quite a lot of traction around Chubb. It's cutting 20% of its global workforce. Allianz announced 1,500 to 1,800 more layoffs. Both are calling it digital transformation. However, Greg Case on the other side says at a conference last week, it is inconceivable that the winner in the application of AI isn't going to lead with a world-class people strategy. Inconceivable. And he's right. Now, this is written by a recruiter, so obviously got a little bit of an axe to grind on this front. But I think we'd probably agree right now that you absolutely need to be thinking people first and culture first when you're thinking about digital transformation, AI initiatives, automation, where it comes in. We had an interesting lunch this week, and you were talking about the three buckets of kind of thinking about your business and where AI could fit, but more importantly, where AI wouldn't fit and where people really do deliver value that can't be at the moment delivered by computers. And I think I'm on Greg's side on this.
Good. Well, I thought you and the AI brigade would be on the other side of this, but I'm glad you've come over. I do think that we are in something we'll come on to in a minute as well in the next thing we're looking at. But I do think inevitably it happens. You start talking about the technology and you keep talking about the technology. And of course you have to talk about the technology, but ultimately the question is, what matters to those people buying insurance policies and growth, and are you delivering a good product? It's really fundamentally key to that. And I'm of the opinion, as is Greg Case and now are you, that really is going to be the thing that's most important. Now we have to change and reskill and use AI more and embrace it and all that sort of stuff that people say. But we also have to think that we're not just doing the same thing. We're going to be changing anyway. So this is my point, is that the AI conversation kind of assumes in many ways that we're just going to use AI to make the current paradigm more efficient or better in some way. Whereas actually, I think you have to rethink the vision and what insurance is really there to do, and how do you grow it, and how do you innovate, and how do you make it into a better product than it is, and more appealing, quite frankly, because there's a big gap, a protection gap. So many people clearly do not get or believe or buy into this product in the way that they should. And so we haven't got something right there. And, we know that, satisfaction levels are not always that great and trust levels are quite low. So there's a lot of things that we can do, we need to think about. And one of the things we mustn't do is stop thinking about all of that just because we think AI is going to be taking over, I think. So firing people is one thing, and they may not be firing them because of AI. I mean, they might just say, well, they were deadwood anyway. I don't know. There's always an excuse for cuts, isn't there? Nobody ever tells you the real reason.
Yeah.
But yes, there are numbers coming out that seem to say that at the margins, AI is going to reduce certain types of jobs. But equally, that's an experiment, and we will see. We've talked before about the supermarket checkouts, which was automated checkouts was a great idea until they're now realizing we've lost touch with the customer.
Yeah. And I think to your point about kind of reshaping the industry, I think there's another thing that I'd like to kind of bring into the mix. So you've got a kind of driver for change there about rethinking from a customer point of view, are we meeting their needs? This week, there's been a kind of the last couple of weeks, actually, the big bit of news more generally about the Claude Mythos technology that they've only partially released because it has implications for cybersecurity, and they're not sure, how the dark forces, rather than the forces for good, will use this for exploitation and or whatever else. So it's quite interesting that when you think about kind of Mythos and the power of that technology and the computer, coupled with the computing power and what it could do in terms of kind of fundamentally changing the nature of risk itself within insurance, I think there needs to be just a bigger conversation that's, rather than the next 18 months, kind of saying, well, where are we in the next 5 years if this was to happen, and how are we going to respond to that, and what will customers need? And quite often, when you start to going down that route, the proposition changes from just a transfer of risk in a monetary sense to being much more either being able to deal with that risk, so prevent it from happening, so your services change, as maybe a broker might see them, with a money element as part of it. And on the flip side, you as a big organization will need to respond to the threat coming in as well. So it's kind of two prongs. Well, it's probably much more than that, but just on a very basic level. So I think it's interesting that, and then you talk about the talent piece, where you're going to need people to think about that and work out where your company is positioned within that new environment, because computers will do more and more and make decisions on their own, and it's just being able to understand that and where you fit in and how you add value.
Yeah, and you have to think about that more, because if you think of, let's take this AI boom as a kind of just more computerization, basically. At the simplest level, there's more digitization of tasks and calculations and all that sort of stuff that we do. And at one level it's amazing, but another level it is just going to be a level playing field, because are you really, these products are produced by big companies that want to sell them to everybody. Now they're not bespoke to one company. One company doesn't get advantage because it uses Mythos versus another, unless one doesn't use it and one does use it. So there's going to be, they've got Mythos, we've got Mythos. We might use it slightly better. They might use it slightly worse, but it's not going to be that big a difference. This is like, if I take an analogy, it's like you like tennis. So if you say tennis rackets have come on in leaps and bounds in terms of technology, but ultimately, the top tennis players in the world get those rackets and that technology first, and they're the players who deal with it and play with it. And it probably doesn't actually make a massive difference to our game of tennis, but it does to theirs. They hit the ball hard anyway. Even if they had a piece of wood, they probably hit it very hard, but they use that. So therefore the technology takes them so far, but actually then it's their capability as a human being to use that new technology to its best effect they don't win because of the racket, but the racket takes them to a level that other players are on. You know, if they had an old, you know, cat gut racket versus one of the new graphite ones or whatever they're made of nowadays, carbon, you know, they'd be at a disadvantage. I think that it's not that much different from that. It's just still that those players have to really rethink things like their nutrition. They have to think things about their psychology and how they approach the game. And all those things, human things, are moved on as fast or as much, if you like, as the technology of the racket. And that's because you're saying, you know, you could take Tour de France as a good example. You know, once they stopped all taking drugs, which I believe they have, that bit of the innovation was taken out of the game. And so they now have focused heavily on nutrition and the science of the body, if you like, and psychology and all that stuff. So you know, it's the same. In the end, the humans have to do more to make the difference. And that's what I think is key here. I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. But I think you'd agree, wouldn't you? There's a lot of kind of people getting caught up in it. Oh, AI's coming and it's happening. And as if, you know, you're in a massive race to get a competitive advantage. Now, there is a bit of a race, but actually you could sit back a bit and go, I'll wait to see what happens, and I'll come in and I'll be on a level playing field. You know, it won't be that. You know, I'm not sure the technology gives you that much advantage, but it may reduce the cost base and change the innovation level of an industry because it's there.
I think it will have more of an impact than that, just because I think the step change in those digital capabilities is it's a leap. It's not kind of a gradual.
Yeah.
So if you take if you look back over the last 30 years of kind of digital change, you can see kind of steps. So you see the .com kind of bubble, but then it became, okay, we need websites. Then we had a mobile, another kind of step change, and I think this can also be seen as another one of those kind of what will seem a natural progression, but right now, as we're in the middle of it, we're not exactly sure how it's going to. So I do think there is that clamor to kind of understand its capabilities and where it would go and how it can be applied in there. I think but I don't think there is that kind of rabbit in the headlights type of, oh my God, we need to have a mobile app, or oh my God, we need a website, or whatever the conversations were. Those other, I think people are being more measured, and I think that is because this time the technology is not something that you can't access. You can't get your hands around it. You can go onto a chat.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think it is slightly different.
I agree. I mean, and we said it before, it's democratic, and it's a bit like the internet. You know, when it first started, it allowed all sorts of things and people to do things and become creative around it. And that's, I kind of think, is where you're going to get the difference. I mean, I think my bet would be, if you decided where are we going to put our investment, and as Greg Case says, you put it into people, those would be the winners. The AI will get cheaper and cheaper, I think, and will become more and more ubiquitous. And as you say, you can, even now, it's not expensive. I mean, and then of course those subscriptions may go up, but I don't think they're going to go up massively. I think it's going to be other ways of them raising revenue. But it's investment in those people and those skills. And that's certainly, when I talk to clients, that's where they feel they're lacking, and that's where their greatest fears are, is that we will not have the right people to compete, because they will be different types of people. You know, whether they come from outside of market, or they come from within the market, or you develop new skills, or you emphasize certain skills over others that historically were important. So most of the insurance market, I would say, probably has based its quality of people on administrative capability. the ability to just work through lots and lots of stuff on, a computer or a spreadsheet. I think that is still very prevalent. Just walk into any insurance company, everybody's sitting behind a computer, most of the day. But I think there'll be much more of the solutions consulting type of thing, the salesy business stuff going on in future and therefore the innovation than we're seeing. And it won't just be in the atrium of the business, it will be everywhere in these businesses.
Yeah.
So they will look and feel different, and they will be different, and there will be people freed up a bit to talk about this change.
Yeah. I think if I was going to put a bet down, and this would be a long shot, is that organizations would spend much more of a digital transformation budget on the people change aspect of delivering that, rather than just the tech. So one thing that came out of a breakfast briefing that was this week is that they were saying, if you've got the investment in the technology is X, and a very, very small percentage of that is for the actual implementation, the change management, training, and all that type of thing. And it's the first bit that gets squashed if there's a delay or overrun or anything else in the thing. And that needs to not switch, but the balance needs to be redressed.
Yeah, I mean, these businesses still sell things, and people earn the decision, and they earn that decision more frequently if they build a strong relationship and they're seen as good service providers and all those sorts of things. I think all of that will be enabled by technology, and you've got to keep up, because if you're slow, that will be a problem, because your technology is holding you back or your data's bad and everything. So, but I do still think, that it's going to be historically that has always been the case, hasn't it? That the technology investment, even when technology was really, really expensive, it was still the bigger cost was the transformation, the people, and the development of people over a much longer period.
Yeah, definitely. Good. Enjoyed that. That's good. Right, where should we go next? Shall we go to the Financial Times and John Neal popping up again?
This is just a quick one. I don't think it needs to be long. This is something we have picked up on the story, and everybody has picked up on it, which is the John Neal story, the governance concerns, and Freshfields has apparently put its report in now on the governance issues that Lloyd's was concerned about in relation to John Neal's term and other things related to that. And the FT has said here that there is a lot of pressure now on Lloyd's to disclose the findings of this report. However, they're also saying that the chairman in particular is reluctant to do that. He feels that it's going to cause more issues than it solves, and they should get on with it and fix all these things in the background. I don't really know the answer to this. I can see both sides of this. I can see that you say, look, we are a responsible set of leaders looking at this report, and we're going to make sure that all of this stuff gets sorted out and fixed and so on. And it wouldn't help us to have all this dirty washing out in public, because all we'd end up doing is chasing our tails on the PR side of things and all that, and we wouldn't really fix anything. So I can see that. But equally, I think it seems to me there are potential. It depends on how serious these issues are. And, I think fair to say that there's probably a lot of people who have been, kind of at risk in this situation, because of various things. And they're also, of course, worried about being sued, apparently. So it's a bit of a mess still, I think. And whether there is something that Roxburgh or Tiernan can do to reassure and clean things up, I don't know. Tiernan is clearly simplifying and streamlining what the organisation of Lloyd's does, and that's good. I think it's not trying to do lots of things that it's not really being asked to do. And if they fix these things or they sort them out, then maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. What do you think?
I think it makes it difficult for them to talk about culture change and behavior and discipline if they don't kind of publish the findings.
Okay.
Yeah, because it kind of just leaves the door open for people to criticize. I'm going, well, that's fine for you to tell us what to do. But
yeah, I kind of agree that there's a bit of a feeling that you publish something and then draw a line under it and say, we are different. This is it. This is the moment of real change. Off we go. Someone wants to sue us, but we believe in our future type thing. I think if we go on with a kind of slightly messy, it's a club feel, we'll sort out our things in the club and not have people. We're asking people to come into this market from the outside. We're asking people to trust it, to be, to believe that it will shift and change culturally, as you say. And I think, yeah, you're probably right that it needs some sort of open but pragmatic kind of reveal of what's being said, and then a level of responsibility that they take to make sure that that is going to be changed in future.
Yeah. And I think it'll also that's a Financial Times, that is not an industry publication. That's a national paper.
Oh, definitely. And I think this, yes, apart from all we just said, I think the fact that the press have got their noses into this and are not going to let go of it. It wasn't just the FT. I could have chosen several other publications that published the same story. And I know they're all very interested in it and they all want to know about it. Now, that's, again, not surprising. The press would do, but it may be naive to think that the press isn't going to grab something out of this anyway, and then you're on the back foot again. There's something is going to break here, and that's the feeling. And I think it's, do you take control of that story and take the lead for all the pain that will cause, or do you just hope to God that it's going to be okay?
Right, next story.
This is really good, this one.
Or bust. Why 60% of insurance customers are ready to walk.
So this is a report, a piece of research done by Accenture and another company. It's called the Ernix survey, but it's about insurance, and it's really, really interesting. It's not something that surprises me, and it's something that I've been working on as well, and others are clearly. But I think this is a major thing to understand. So basically, what it says is that this is the 60% is the percentage of customers who would switch providers in insurance for a more personalized service, not for a lower premium, not after a claim dispute, simply because another carrier offered to treat them as an individual rather than a policy number, which is kind of stuff we said before about our own businesses. Why don't they understand us? And we would go to that place, pay a bit more for that if that could happen. So price-driven, industry commoditized, distribution, bit of brand recognition, obviously. But this is the article is saying this is a major shift, and this is what Accenture is saying. The battleground for customer loyalty has moved. It's gone into another space, which is where you have to provide stuff that people actually know is for them, not just a generic product. And this is part of the issues. So that's all very well. So the problem is, though, that these policies are gaining traction, these kind of personalized usage-based products and so on and so forth. But only 1 in 4 insurers say they can deliver personalization at scale today because their systems are poor, and their data in particular is very poor. So that means while customers want this and it's a great opportunity, 75% in the industry is saying we're just going to carry on giving them generic products. It also says it's not really just a technology gap. It's also strategic, because many carriers haven't really treated personalization as a growth lever. They don't believe it, and I agree with that. I think many of them are so far away from the customer that it doesn't make sense. I mean, look at the rate argument we talked about at the beginning. It's quite interesting if you're inside the industry, and it has some, but there weren't many kind of touches on what this means for people and could you change the product to be better, as we said. So I think so what is this in practice, this personalization? It's could just become a marketing buzzword, but it's more than that, I think, and it is some of the things that we've touched on. So what does it mean for a policyholder? So there's a few examples they give. So when a customer calls about their home insurance, the agent, or it could be an AI agent, already knows they've recently renewed their auto policy. They have a teenage driver. They live in a postcode that experienced severe weather or didn't, according to my earlier example. Yeah. It knows already stuff about me and then uses that to make suggestions. Now, people like Akershire are talking about this. They're saying that they're going to do the same thing and try, and so it's not happening. Dynamic pricing, for example, that could change in terms of actual behavior, IoT type stuff and all that sort of stuff. But the problem really is something that we keep coming across is data, the quality, completeness, and what carriers are allowed to do with it. So there's real problems with data, basically. So it says 83% of insurance executives are concerned that their AI models are being trained on inaccurate or incomplete data. 2/3 report that poor data quality actively slows decision-making and limits AI effectiveness, and nearly 40% cite data security and privacy settings as the most significant challenge affecting their AI adoption initiatives. But what this does for this demand for personalization is it makes it worse. So if you put bad data and AI and bad data and then try and personalize it, then the things that you try to personalize don't work and they don't make sense, and then you kill it. And it actually makes the customer think that you don't understand them at all, which is terrible. So what's happening? People are beginning to look at this. It is the next big thing, and people like Accenture are talking about it. And various others. It's not just Accenture, but some of this is currently aimed at personal lines, but actually, I think it works for SME, small businesses, and even larger businesses as well. It makes sense to me. There are going to be more and more demands as younger people come through for personalized experiences. They're going to expect that. They're going to want that, and it's going to be the opportunity for the industry. But if we can't do it and we just deliver generic products, then it will all be for nothing. So they are moving, and the other thing is it creates loyalty. So if you get this personalization, it really does have a massive ratchet up effect on loyalty, which is the problem the industry has at the moment, is people just moving around and, picking and choosing according to aggregators or whatever. Now, if you can create loyalty, you can create real efficiencies and grow. So the article finishes really by saying that customers want to leave now, and they would leave, but they just don't have the opportunity to do it at the moment as much as they could, and it's not often being presented to them. So it's a bit like the whole tech space, which is, you used to be kind of really locked into things when you bought something online. Now you're not. You can really choose and select and buy the stuff you want and personalize it, and that's what insurance has to do.
What do you think is driving that? Because I remember this is quite a few years ago at TinTech, where somebody was saying, I think on an aggregator site or something like that, an existing customer would change their policy for something like a difference of £6 on average, or something like it. So it was all kind of price driven, a decade ago.
Yeah.
What do you think's changed in? Have we become richer, and we go, actually, I'm not. I'm now about service, and
I think it's so. I don't think it's this. I think it's quite complex. But so I say two things about that, and I haven't got a complete answer because you have to kind of really understand what's going on. But
yeah,
one of the things is it depends on how you present it. So aggregators are presented as a price option, right? I mean, the whole structure of the aggregation industry is basically to say we can get you a cheaper price. They're not necessarily saying we can get you a value price, although there are data in there that you can look at to say I'll have something extra and things, but they're really quite commoditized things. You're still buying generic products. And the only difference really is that one was £600 and one was £1,200. And, you know, you might have a bit of legal on this or, you know, or you trust a brand a bit more. I don't know. But basically there isn't that much differentiation. So the reason why pricing statistics and data like that comes out is because that is the thing that's measurable off something that you've presented in that way. You know, you expect that result. People don't have the option to personalize, so there's no kind of evidence that that's there, that need is there until you actually ask people. So we've got an industry that's basically based around spreadsheet type analysis, financial analysis. And you've just done it exactly that to say, well, why do people go for £6, not £4, not £3? I mean, that is probably most of the discussions that happen in planning sessions in rooms. Not was the purchase of the insurance easy? Did we have a chat with them on the phone about things that are upcoming and they've just moved house or they've just bought a car or they've bought a boat or they'd like to buy a boat or they, you know, whatever it is that matters, or they've got someone who's ill in the family, or, you know, anything that you would think would be very relevant to insurance, but treated me like a human being, like a market of one, not just that among thousands of other people. And that's really the difference. And that is heavily based on having good data. Yeah. Not just generic data, but I mean, I even called it out earlier on saying they don't even get the postcode stuff right. So how the hell they're going to know what I might need or you might need, or, you know, and we've said it before about like our business needs. The data collection on PI, for example, is laughable. I mean, it's ridiculously poor. You can tell even the collection of that stuff. And I think I was at your recent conference on delegated, and the big complaint coming out was about how many questions keep getting added to insurance stuff, you know, all the time, because nobody really knows what they want. They just think, I better add a few questions. You know, they're not questions though that are asked. They're not the right questions. They're not the questions about what does Jeremy want and need and make him feel special, you know, that he's buying something for himself. I mean, otherwise it's a race to the bottom, I think, is what's happened, and that's what we've had for too long.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same. That's how you smooth the industry. That's how you smooth it, because you don't just go, sorry, we're not writing that for you anymore. We're not covering your car because our financials don't add up. You go, we are covering your car. It's a little bit more expensive. We've offset it for a year, but we've given you something else, and and you believe them. You like the relationship, and you're prepared to go through that period. You know, there's always going to be a price-driven element, but you should try and take that out of an industry where you show the value more.
Yeah,
so I think it's a very big number, and it's a very kind of decisive, clear piece of evidence that the industry has an option to be different. Yeah. But it's constrained by the data, which we've heard everywhere. So I think what this does is it links it to the customer rather than to a kind of internal operational discussion.
Yeah. And that is interesting, because I think that is starting to happen more and more. And we spoke over lunch about kind of how the conversation is drifting now from, not drifting, but moving from operational efficiency into kind of much more kind of strategic front end customer conversations, which is an interesting development, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Good. Right. Thanks for that, Ben. That was good fun. What are you doing this weekend?
Not much. One of my bigger kids is coming down. Works in government. So I'll find out what's going on. Should be interesting. Look at the results. Bit of footy. Kind of latter part of the weekend for my team. See what happens in the quite interesting bottom of the table and top of the table.
Yeah, it is all very exciting.
Other than that, yeah.
Very good. I've got a new shed that's been finished this afternoon.
I've seen your shed. It's very beautiful. It's much more than a shed.
It is a little bit more than a shed. So I'm looking forward to have a look at that and finish it off and things like that. So yes, lots of fun in a shed.
Shed's very exciting. I like it. Yeah.
Good. Right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will be back next week. Oh, I might be back, Ben. I'm actually in London. Anyway, I'll speak to you about that. We'll be back sometime. And until then, have a good weekend.
Have a good one. Bye.